Hello, welcome to the Rooms with Ronald podcast, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. In 2023, I set an intention to shop 100 apartment communities to see how leasing was evolving around the country. Rooms with Ronald was born out of that experience. In this series, I share my experiences and engage in meaningful conversations with other professionals in the industry as we discuss all things related to leasing and marketing. Join in as we expand the Rooms with Ronald experiment. Hello, and welcome to Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington, and in this podcast brought to you by the MMN Network, we talk all things leasing and marketing. So welcome back to another exciting episode. Today's a solo episode, which I haven't done a full-length solo episode of Rooms with Ronald in quite some time. So I thought I would bring back that for you, the listeners. And what I want to talk about today is surprise and delight, and how we can incorporate some of these things into our leasing world, into our resident world, all of those things, right? And where this idea kind of came from was recently I've been traveling for the holidays, as I tend to travel a lot anyways. And we went to Vegas, and I had some really great experiences that were some surprise and delights, right? And it got me thinking about how can we start to incorporate these little moments into our industry, right? Because the hospitality industry is doing it. Other industries are doing it. So what can we do that is surprise and delight? And actually, it kind of started even before we got to Vegas, right? So we were scheduled to fly out the day after Christmas, and I noticed that our flight was delayed. Leaving Indianapolis, we had a layover in Atlanta, and we were delayed. And I noticed that we were going to miss our connecting flight in Atlanta. And I kept thinking, it's going to be a nightmare. I don't want to be stuck in Atlanta. I just want to get to Vegas already. So I went to the Southwest app. I found where I could text them, and we started a whole texting conversation about my delayed flight. And I thought it was going to be a process, right? Because technically they hadn't bumped me yet or canceled my flight, and it was still several hours earlier. So as you know, in airline, things could change. And so I was already dreading this experience, right? I was just like, do we really, I don't want to be in Atlanta. So we're going back and forth. The agent greets me. She acknowledged my A-list preferred status, which is a minor detail, right? Like, it's not a huge deal, but it is for someone who travels a lot, right? And so I spent a lot of money to kind of travel and get that A-list status and that A-list preferred status. So that was a surprise to me because not everyone acknowledges that status. And the same thing kind of happens when you rent a car, when you check into a hotel, right? There's not that acknowledgement of your status. So that instantly was kind of like a surprise. I was like, okay, she's read the profile. She has a little bit of information. And I explained the situation. Like, I know it's early and I know all these things. And so is there a way we can kind of change our flight? She looked it up. And I know some of you might be thinking, yes, you could have done it on the app. They do the free days, same change rate. But the problem is my husband was flying with me, who is my companion. So he's flying on a companion pass. And if you don't know how the companion pass works, it means he flies for free after I book my flight. So I book my flight, I add him on there, we pay the taxes, but he has a separate confirmation number. And I can't do anything as the account holder of the companion pass until I cancel his reservation. I did not want to cancel his reservation because I was afraid it was going to mess up the flow. And then what would have happened if I booked the flight and I got the last seat? He wasn't going to be able to fly, and then it was going to be a whole thing, right? So I had to reach out, and I was dreading it, just like I dread talking to people in customer service, especially after the holidays, right? Because it's a whole thing. But once I got this conversation, I said, here, I see this flight's available on the app. This time works for me. Could you switch it for me? She took care of it and no problem. It was probably one of the smoothest transactions that I've had when I've had dealing with it, which is the opposite of what I had earlier in 2024 in October when we were flying to Rome and the aircraft got downgraded and all of that, right? That was not a surprise and delight. That was like dread and like nightmare, essentially, what that flight was. So that's why I was kind of dreading it. And I will tell you that this is probably the same thing that your prospects are experiencing as well, right? They might have had a negative experience at a community, maybe where they live at now, prior, before even coming to you. And so they're like, oh, I don't want to go tour these apartments. The first one I toured, they weren't even expecting me. They weren't ready. None of that. So this is your chance to kind of surprise and delight them. Just like she, knew my status, you can know their name and what they're looking for. That will be a surprise and delight. And you can be upbeat, because I can tell you, I've shopped a lot of properties that were not upbeat, and they were very like, what do you want? What can I do for you? I can't show you today. Right. So that's how we started off. So that kind of set the tone. And then we got to Vegas, we got checked in, and I tend to go to the same casinos, right? I have a rhythm, essentially. And one of my favorite casinos to go to in the morning until I tube is Park MGM, because I love mimosas. And a lot of people know this about me. Like, I'm a mimosa drinker. I love orange juice in my champagne, and it's a whole thing. But Park MGM is the only casino on the strip that does something different with their mimosas. We are going into the process, and the first time I went, I ordered my mimosa. I was like, yeah, can I get a mimosa? And so the server brings it back, and probably one of the quickest drink deliveries on the strip. So that was a surprise to me. But not only did she bring it back, because I'm used to going to all the other casinos and getting my mimosa, and usually it comes in a plastic cup, orange juice, or pineapple juice, depends on my morning, and the champagne all kind of mixed. I'm like, okay, so that was my expectation. The first time I ordered from Park MGM, I got a glass with a little bit of orange juice and a full bottle, like mini bottle of champagne. So, that was a surprise to me, because no one else is doing that, right? And they don't have to do that. I mean, they could have just pre-made it like everyone else. But she brought it around, and I was like, oh, wow, what a nice surprise for something that I'm technically not paying for, right? Yes, I am gambling, and I understand that, right? So there is a sense that you are paying for, but there is not a money transaction for that drink and me with that server. Now, yes, I do tip her, right? So I thought, oh my gosh, this is really cool. I got a bottle. So I knew, this one, I could see the title of it, and why that's important to me is knowing what the brand is because I tend to break out with surface hives on cheap champagne. I know it sounds funny, right? So I knew okay, so if I drink this bottle and I don't break out, this is not, my body doesn't think it's cheap champagne. So I can know this is safe, and I will continue to see what else has it. So I thought, okay, so this is really cool. And I thought, well, the first time I did it, I was like, oh, it's surprise and delight. And, maybe, they ran out in the back or whatever the situation may be. So then the next time I went, the same thing happened. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is their standard. But for someone who has never ordered a mimosa at that bar or out on that casino floor, they would not know that that was the standard. And that is where the surprise and delight comes in. So, how can you can have a standard, right? And that your standard could be that surprise and delight with that bottle of champagne and things like that. But what can you do to your prospects that offers that same standard, right? And I was, mindlessly scrolling through Snapchat and people's stories not too long ago, and I noticed one of my friends was looking for an apartment in Austin on a Snapchat, and like the first snap of the story was, oh, I'm going apartment shopping today. I'm dreading it. It's not, it's not going to be fun, which is let's be real, a lot of our like conversation in our industry, right? That's what people think about. Oh, apartment shopping. It's kind of like buying a car. It's kind of like calling the cable company. And so I was like, oh, so like, I'm like, hopefully they post stories throughout the process so I can see, the progression and see like, is it a bad experience? Is it a good experience? And so, later on the day, I get back on and I'm going through their stories. And I noticed that there's a story of when he went to shop an apartment and he was back in his car and it said, wow, the apartment community gave me a free bottle of champagne. If this is what apartment shopping is going to be like, bring it on. That was a surprise and delight for him because he was not expecting champagne, right? So he was just like, oh, I'm going to have to go shop for an apartment. So that set a tone, which in return actually is where they chose to lease the apartment at, is because of that surprise and delight. No one else offered this prospect champagne on their tour, right? And I've been on tours where they've offered a glass of wine, like they had the wine machines, and I thought that was really cool, especially because they did have one of my favorite wines in there, which is a surprise and delight. Do you have to go that grand of a gesture? Maybe not. But maybe you have the budget and you can, right? So finding these little moments like that allows for this surprise and delight makes it that much simpler, right? So then the second, place I always go to, and I've been going to here recently, and mind you, I go to Vegas maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So it's not like I'm one, and things like that. So the next place I go to is Harrah's in the mornings for my mimosa. Usually because I stay at the Caesars properties, Harrah's right there. I like their games. I know their mimosas. But let me tell you why I started to go back to Harrah's more consistently for my drinks. Again, it's a casino, right? In Vegas, that means when you're playing at the machine, they're free. So that's not the surprise and delight, right? But what the surprise and delight is we went over the summer, and we were playing there. And my husband was on the back side and I was on a different side. And so there was a row of machines. So the server gets his drink first order. And she does her little rounds and she comes around and then she comes and gets mine. And you can tell she's kind of confused for a second, right? And so she says, okay, so she delivers my husband his drink first. And then she goes around. He's done playing. So he comes in, he's standing by me while I'm playing. And she's so shocked. She thought we looked alike. And we must have been twins, right? And so we're like, no, we're married. We go through the whole thing. And she asks her name, where we're from. She builds that connection. We go back probably 2 months later, and same thing, right? We go. She remembered who we were, right? She was like, oh my gosh, you guys are back. And it kind of caught me off guard a little bit because I was just like, this is Vegas. There are tens of thousands, if not millions of people in and out of here week in and week out, right? And she remembered who we were. And I thought, oh, well, we were just here a month or two ago, right? So that's not, when we went back right after Christmas, she remembered who we were. We walked in. She remembered our drink order. She was like, okay, Jared, do you want a spicy Bloody Mary? You want a mimosa with pineapple juice? And so she delivered the surprise and delight as a server and all of that. And she recalled some of the conversations. And she even made, she's like, well, I don't know if I have ever asked you this before, but do you guys sing? Because you guys have a really nice tone quality. And we're like, no, hey, you don't ever want to hear my husband sing because it's not good. And she was like, are you sure? And I was like, we were at a bar in Key West once doing karaoke, and someone from the audience had to jump up onto stage and help my husband sing the song. It was that bad. But the fact that she remembered me was a surprise and delight. Both of those stories, right? Same place, opposites, right? It wasn't they They were that surprise and light factor. What that did for them, for me as a consumer, is it showed me brand loyalty, right? It now allows me to build that brand loyalty. So if I have to choose, where I'm going to spend my money if I was in Vegas, where do you think I'm going to spend it? I'm going to spend it in the mornings at Harrah's or at Park MGM because of that experience and that surprise and delight. The same thing happened with my friend. So it's not just me, right? It happened with my friend in Austin who toured an apartment, got a bottle of champagne, did go around to see the other experiences, but came back to them. It was simple, a small gesture. In the Harris case, it cost them nothing. Like it cost Trina, that was the server's name, nothing. Don't know how she remembered our name, what we were, right? We made it an impression, but it was a surprise and delight for the consumer, which also meant she probably got more money because we tipped her better than we did someone who would just deliver our drinks. Now, I do promise this whole episode is not about alcohol. So we went to Portland, and we were in Oregon and for the New Year, and we kind of got checked into the hotel. We kind of went around and we went to, one night we went to Voodoo Donuts. And I don't know if you guys know what Voodoo Donuts are, but they have 1,000 different donuts that are very custom made and very unique and sometimes not appropriate names and designs. Or at least that was my experience in Portland. So we in their sidewalk areas where it's a window and you go and we placed it. So we get the menu and we're like, the people in front of us, they're ordering like a dozen donuts and it is like 10, 11 o'clock at night. So I'm like, okay, what do you want? So like my husband's like, I want these two. And I'm like, I want these two. So like our goal is we were going to buy 4 donuts. And I will mind you that those 4 donuts did come out to about $20. Again, not what I was expecting, but the goal is so I give the guy the order. He comes, I like insert my credit card, I pay, and then he gives me the box of donuts after I've already taken my credit card out. So the transaction part is complete. There is no more like exchange of money. I've already hit the tip, right? All of that. So he hands me the box of donuts that I ordered. Now, mind you, I've ordered 4. The box was heavy. And I was like, I kind of probably stepped back. And I was like, oh, what is this, right? I was like, are you sure this is my box? And he was like, oh yeah, I gave you a couple extra donuts. That's the surprise and delight, right? He was not expecting anything in return. Now, and I'm like, okay, a couple donuts. So we're walking back to the hotel and we get to the hotel and I opened it up and a couple donuts, like there were 14 donuts in this box for 2 people the day before we left, right? He, and he could have did this for many reasons, right? It might have been the end of the night, except for it was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. They don't close to 3 or 4 in the morning. So it's not like it was like the last call kind of thing. He did it from a customer service standpoint, right? It was cold outside. We had to stand. He was the only person in there. So he felt bad. But he did not do it in the sense where a lot of people get the surprise and delight wrong is that they think if I do it, then I tell them I'm going to get something in return. So, it wasn't like he was expecting a bigger tip because he gave us donuts because I had already taken my credit card out. So I didn't have any cash on me. So I couldn't tip him more. So it was truly a true surprise and delight. Brands do this all the time. Why can't we do it in multifamily? Surprise and delight can be simple. It could be little things. It can be, picking a building a month and calling them just to check in. You're not calling to see what work orders do you have. You're not calling to see what's going on, with your neighbors, none of that. You're just calling to check in. How's it going? How's your day? Thank you for being a resident. It can be things like you just found out that your move-in just got married and this is their first apartment together. They're coming back newly. So you place flowers. I've done flowers. I've done balloons, right? Little things like that. It could be knowing that on the conversation piece, right? You're touring and you notice that someone loves Big Red. It's their favorite soda. They come to move in and you open it up and there's a case of Big Red or a 2 liter or two bottles, whatever that situation may be, right? And I think this is kind of where the industry was going with the move-in gifts at one point, right? That was a nice little touch, a nice little surprise and delight. The same thing happens, when you write a handwritten note. It can be simple, right? We can just say, thanks for moving in with us. Here is your handwritten note, and we move on. Another surprise and delight that I had in Oregon was when we checked into the hotel, we got up to our room and I had gotten an automatic upgrade in the system because I'm the highest level with Hilton and things like that. So that was a surprise and right, to wake up to an email that says, congratulations, we've upgraded your flight, or we've upgraded your room. You're now in this room. Now, when I went to check in, I had the option to book the standard room that I was in if I didn't want this free upgrade, and it was a free upgrade. But we checked in, and on the table, it told me who serviced our room, who was the housekeeper, right? This room has been cleaned and by Anna, and it was inspected by Susie. That's not their names, but you get the point of the story, right? So to me, this was a huge surprise, right? It was like, oh, okay, now it's personalized. I know who was in here. I know, like, when I see them out in the hallways, it gave me that. And it gave me an idea, right? I used to do inspection cards, like, in the home, right? This apartment was made ready by and had the maintenance technician's name, which is a nice surprise. But what if we took that simple concept and we made it, a little bit more, right? We added just a little bit more. And maybe it has that maintenance technician's photo, right? You don't have to buy them in bulk, right? If you're going to print it in the office, you can print them in the office. You can buy them if you have things like that. But now it does a couple things. It gives that maintenance technician a sense of pride because their name is going to go on something. No longer are they just an employee. No longer are they not getting recognized. Now their face is there, their name is there. The resident know who made their apartment ready. They take some ownership. The second thing that it does from the surprise and delight of the resident is now I know at least one face on the maintenance team. So when this person comes to do any work orders, I know, like, oh, okay, I've seen your face before. There it is, right? So it's those little touch points along the way that really, truly inspire us in that surprise and delight. And we see this time after time in other industries, right? Chewy, they're huge, right? That's why people talk about their customer service is because of surprise and delight. Your pet died, they send you a card, they send you flowers, they tell you to send things out like that, right? Have you ever gotten a free meal because just because, right? Sometimes we'll see this like gift of gratitude, right? The car in front of you will pay for your drink and then you pay for the next person's, and it goes on and on and on, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, we're helping people in need and all of those things. And we could get into the, dynamics of that. But really, like, if you're already in line, you could afford that drink or whatever it was. What they're really doing is they're adding cheer and they're adding a surprise and delight because you weren't expecting it, right? And there is no way for you to come back in and pay it forward to this person, right? Because they're long gone. Now, what you can do is you can surprise and delight the next person and keep it going. And let me tell you, when I worked at Starbucks, I hated that because it was a nightmare, right? Like, it put you as the cashier in an awkward situation. Like, oh yeah, this person paid for it. And then they're like, oh, well, I'm going to pay for the person's behind me. And then it was like, yeah, there is like $16. And then they're like, oh, well, I'm going to pay. It was a whole thing, right? But it added cheer to people's day. And really, I'm telling you, that's kind of what the whole concept of surprise and delight is. right? So take a moment and write down some ways that you can continue to surprise and delight your prospects, your residents. How do you surprise and delight each other to build that office morale? Because they all do go hand in hand with each other, right? If my team is happy, they're going to take care of my residents. If my residents are happy, they're going to renew. Then my owners aren't happy. I can give my prospects in. Guys, surprise and delight does not have to be about the gimmicks, right? It's not a gimmick. It's not like, lease here. You don't tell people about it. The whole joy of surprise and delight is that it spreads by word of mouth. Just like when we started, Park MGM they're not expecting me to go on and tell everyone on my podcast that they gave me a bottle of champagne, right? No, they do it because they know that I'm going to spread the words and it builds the brand loyalty. Trina, was not expecting me to call her out or to even come back and to give her a big tip. She just cared about, the people, and she enjoys what she's doing, and people can see that in the work. And I'm sure that she probably has the most tips of the people, right? Chewy isn't expecting you to love them and broadcast, right? It's that word of mouth. And they know that that's how they're going to build that brand loyalty. The same thing has to happen here, right? My friend, bottle of champagne. Now he moved in there. So that bottle of champagne might have cost them, it was like a mini bottle. It wasn't a full, and we're not talking like Dom or anything like that. We're just talking like a mini, solo bottle, $5-6, right? So it cost them $5 or $6 to get a lease that is probably going to be in the upwards of $17,000 to $19,000. But it's simpler than that, right? You don't have to buy things. To me, it's knowing a prospect's name when they walk in the door, being willing to help them with the process, right? Genuinely connecting with them, showing that you care about them. Those are all little things that you can do that surprise and delight. Offering them a bottle of water, having, their favorite snacks that you may not know, you may do. I used to do the surveys and have people tell me what there is, right? Available to them, or offering them, hey, do you want a Celsius? Hey, what are you doing after this? Do you need a recommendation on a local food place? All of those things, are the surprises and delights that add up over time. Take a surprise and delight here. Now you're building it, right? And it starts, with the process. If it's smooth and easy, that's a surprise and delight, right? If you have what I'm looking for, that's a surprise and delight. But what happens when we move in? Once we move in, we tend to think that they stop. And maybe it's sending a birthday card to everyone whose birthday is in that month. That's a surprise, right? Maybe it's having a birthday party for everyone. You have a cake and everyone, you invite all the February birthdays down to the office on this date, things like that. Brand loyalty is all about those surprises and the unexpected, doing things that your competitors aren't doing. No longer is it acceptable just to be able to sit at a computer, answer the phone, give the information, and move on. Prospects, they don't want that. They're looking for a hyperized, personalized care. They're looking to be wowed, these wow moments. And a lot of times, if you have not read The Power of Moments, I encourage you to read The Power of Moments, because there are so many different things that you can learn. That's why Disney is so magical, right? Kids drop their ice cream and then bam, someone's there with another ice cream. It was a surprise and delight. You weren't expecting that. That's why people go to Starbucks and they pay more money at Starbucks, is because if their drink's not right, they will remake it for you, no questions asked. Surprise and delight. We could go on and on and on about what it means and how you can incorporate it. What I'm going to leave you with is this final nugget. Look around you. Look outside of the industry. We as multifamily become so focused on what our competitors are doing, what other people in the industry are doing, that we forget there are hundreds 1,000 of other things outside the industry. Go look at them. Just like I did a whole podcast on Surprise and Delight Day because of an experience I had over traveling, right? So look at other industries. Find ways to incorporate what other industries are doing into your leasing process, because people are going to start expecting that, because they're comfortable with that, right? Like, I expect my leasing process to be like my hotel shopping process, my check-in process, my flight check-in, all of those things. So stop what you're doing. Make a list of 3 things that you can do to start to surprise and delight your prospects and your residents. Thank you for listening to Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. This podcast is brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. And until next time, guys, continue to surprise and delight. Happy leasing. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I left you with some fresh ideas or a new perspective. Leasing and marketing are evolving rapidly, and Rooms with Ronald is committed to offering a place to hear about those changes. We also celebrate and acknowledge the fundamentals of exceptional service that will never go out of style. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, or subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other exceptional industry podcasts, call pieces, and sponsorship opportunities.